right, so yesterday, you folks unpacked your first assessment with the second unit. And the assessment is essentially pick your own prompt. So you learned that you're going to be writing an expository essay, but you decide whether your essay is going to be about the dystopian society in Fahrenheit 451, or if you're going to be writing about Guy Montag's hero's journey of Fahrenheit 451. Guy Montag is the protagonist. He is considered the hero of your story. So with that in mind, I want you to go ahead and answer on your purple bookmark, how did activity 2.1 prepare you for writing this choice of an expository essay? Once you've got your purpose statement written, go ahead and set that bookmark to the side, and you're going to open up Springboard to page 93. If you have two different colored highlighters, I would suggest that you pull them out. If you only have one, no big deal. You just make yourself a few different markings today. Okay, so new activity means we need to start with? You got it. Learning targets. Go ahead and just use those two. Let's figure out the purpose of this activity, what it's going to prep us for. All right, now the first bullet point is the only piece that we're really going to be focusing in on today. We will be analyzing a type of organizational structure called compare and contrast. The second bullet point is going to be more for tomorrow, where you folks are going to be constructing a paragraph following that organizational structure. All right, before we step any further, let's go ahead and take a look at the academic vocabulary box on the right-hand side of page 93. So could you please read for us, Ilya, the academic vocab about compare and contrast?
Compare and contrast is a rhetorical strategy and method of organization in which a writer examines some similarities and differences between two people, places, ideas.
Perfect. Now do me a favor, folks. I want you to go ahead and just highlight that key info. You can either follow what I've done on the screen or you could write yourself. So compare and contrast is our focus for the entire activity. We'll analyze compare and contrast. We will write compare and contrast. And once you've done that, we're going to go ahead and focus on that subheading, review of expository writing. So Amaya, could you read the chunk of info right below that subheading, review of expository writing?
We have had many experiences writing expository notes. Every time you explain something or define a concept or idea, you are writing an expository text. One form of expository writing is compare and contrast. This method of organization is an important model of exposition to master and can be used in many different writing systems.
Thanks. So we've got step one telling us to brainstorm ideas. And what have you had to compare and contrast in the past? Now I'm going to share two possible pieces that I'm pretty sure every single one of you has tackled, and then you're going to develop some of your own. So I know for a fact in World Geo you either have done this or it's coming up, where you folks have compared two nations, the United States to Canada. And the way that perhaps you may have compared them is by looking at the similarities and differences of the language spoken there, similarities and difference regarding location, so latitude and longitude, as well as the climate. Back in 7th grade, I know you folks have worked with a compare and contrast piece of a patriot versus a loyalist. And I can't recall precisely how you looked at the comparison of those two, but I wouldn't doubt that some of your comparison had to deal with the government beliefs of those two bodies, the location, so where exactly could you have found a patriot versus a royalist in the original 13 colonies, as well as who were considered the leaders at the time. So now what I'm going to have you do, I'm going to give you about a minute and a half. I want you to go ahead and complete a third topic or a third series of the topic that you've had to compare and contrast either in this class or in a different class from either this year or previous year. All right, so take a minute and a half, go ahead and brainstorm it. What was the subject that you compared? How did you make the comparison happen? You know, at the bottom of page 93, you've got this graphic organizer, and we're going to be just taking some notes on what exactly it means, and we'll be highlighting some text. So this is where you're going to use the two different colored highlighters if you have them. If you don't, no big deal. You don't have to have them. Just make a series of different markings. That way things stand out. There are two ways this year that you're going to write a compare or contrast piece. It's either by using the format called subject by subject or the format feature by feature. Now, I wouldn't doubt that you have utilized both in the past, but you just didn't realize that that was an actual format type. So the first one we're going to look at is titled subject by subject. So I'm going to have you do first is go ahead and highlight subject by subject. And I'm going to have you write in the My Notes column what the heck subject actually means. When you compare or contrast subject by subject, the subject is the person, the place, or the thing that is being discussed in your writing. It is what is being analyzed. So if you have trouble remembering what subject is, I have kiddos from the past just think of it as blank versus blank. So the idea of the United States versus Canada, of a dog versus a cat, of a Union versus the Confederacy. Now, the way subject by subject works is that you speak about all of the features of one subject in its entirety, and then you move on to all of the features of the second subject. So let's say in this example that you see in your springboard, you're writing an essay about mammals versus reptiles. The way that you would write the essay is first you discuss all about mammals, you never bring up the other subject, and then the last half of your work you discuss all about reptiles. But notice in your actual framework, even though it's going one subject at a time, each of the items that's helping the analysis, they go in order. So mammals will first speak about habitat, reptiles will first speak about habitat, so on. Okay, now the second type of organization is called feature by feature. So go ahead and highlight feature by feature. What feature means, that's the object or the idea that's actually explaining the analysis itself. So the subject is telling me what is being analyzed, the item that's being analyzed or discussed. The feature is how the analysis is going to work. What am I specifically targeting to analyze? So back in the feature by feature column, this is what I like to call the ping pong method, and this is something that you folks do a lot in elementary school. So what happens here is you would select one feature that both subjects possess. Then you tell me specifically each subject, how it fits into that feature. So for instance, let's say this item that they gave us in the actual subject, or not subject, in the actual column, well, I'm going to talk about the habitat. Well, mammals live in this habitat, but reptiles live in this habitat. But mammals like to do this in their habitat, whereas reptiles like to do this in their habitat. It keeps going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Subject by subject is a little bit clearer, and it's something I'm going to be shooting for you folks to work with a little bit more versus the feature by feature that does a little ping pong effect. All right, now tomorrow your objective is going to be to write a piece using one of these structures. Again, I'm going to be pushing you to try and break away from feature by feature and actually use subject by subject. Go ahead and turn the page if you've got all of these notes down. You can go ahead and call that step 4. We're not going to be looking at that one. And instead, we're going to be starting off with step 5. What we're going to do before we read. So, Jacob, could you read step 5 for us on page 94?
Involving two additional civil war soldiers, Gillespie, Grant, leader of the Union Army, and Robert E. Lee.
Thanks. Now, it's not going to show up on the screen, but I'm going to ask you to make a couple of highlighted marks here. Go ahead and highlight Grant, Union, North. Highlight Lee, Confederate, South. So this is going to be your quick note, your reminder when you read this piece, hey, if I forgot who was for which side, this will be the place to go back to. All right, step 6 tells us that you're going to be reading some quotes, and you're going to try and extract heroic qualities about each one of these men. So Grant was considered a hero for the Union Army. Lee was considered the hero of the Confederacy. So what I'm going to have you do first, with those bullet points, go ahead and number them off, 1 through 6, just like you see on the screen. And we don't have time to look at every single quote, so we're not going to do every one, but I'm still having you number them. What I'm going to have us do first is to look at the very first quote given by Grant, and we're going to see what possible heroic traits Grant is showing just in that one statement that he made. So, could you go ahead and read for us, please, Jordan, the first quote from Ulysses S. Grant?
Although a soldier by profession, I have never felt any sort of confidence in war, and I have never advocated it except as a means of peace.
All right. What possible heroic trait could you pick up from that man's statement? What do you think, Santiago?
Never advocated for war.
Okay, he's not an advocate of war. He doesn't like it. That's a nice negation strategy. Anything else? It's okay if not. Give up Joshua, hand on head. Okay. All right, here's a couple of pieces that I considered when I looked at this very first quote. So in your My Notes column, I am going to have you write the number 1. That's going to indicate these were traits for the first quote. Now, the item that Santiago brought up about how this man, who was a leader of an army, not an advocate of war, I thought there was a true honesty in that. It's kind of a breath of fresh air. This was this man's livelihood. This is how he made money, how he survived, by being a guy that would lead men into war. But the fact that he doesn't like it, wow, that takes some truth-telling. Not only that, I feel that this man is very calm. The idea that he sees war as a way for peace, that's an interesting perspective. I don't think a lot of people would necessarily look at it that way. So what I'm going to have you do with a partner, I'm going to ask you to pick one more quote per leader. So one quote for Grant, one quote for Lee, and I want you to do that same process. See if you can extract what could be a heroic trait or quality in each one of those quotes about those men. So take about, let's say, no more than 2 minutes. Pick one quote about each man, discuss it with your partner. What kind of trait do you see with that? Go ahead. If you're still working your way through, that's okay. I'm just going to pick up our piece a little bit here. What was another heroic trait or quality that you found in a quote about Grant? What was the trait that you found, Joshua?
in the second quote, it says the intentions that I'm communicating are intended no are changes to personal living. And it shows that he's very humble.
I like that. So Joshua pointed out in the second quote, the statement that Grant made really made him appear humble. I'm glad that it's about the country, it's not about me. All right, what about Robert E. Lee? What was the heroic trait or quality that you found in one of the quotes about Lee? What did you find, please?
For number 4.
Okay.
It shows that he's strong-minded, has strong beliefs.
Nice. He's strong-minded, strong-willed. He stays with his beliefs. I like that. Anything else? A different trait or quality? And number 5, the man is selfless and he's caring. That's great. All right, now there's 2 more things that we're going to tackle before we actually read this piece about the comparison and contrast of Lee and Grant. So step 7, it's at the bottom of page 94. We're not going to read all the way through it. We're just going to highlight the info that we need. Right? And it's telling us how we should be looking at this reading. So one of the main objectives of your reading is to be able to analyze the structure of this piece. So how specifically did the author set up for a comparison and a contrast of both of these men? So while we're reading, you are going to annotate your text, meaning you're going to mark it up. And what you're going to be marking specifically for, first, where exactly did the similarities of the men appear, and where did the differences appear? Secondly, what you're going to be marking your text for, you're going to highlight words, phrases, statements that identify the main idea of each paragraph. So within each chunk, maybe it'll be specifically about Grant, maybe it'll be specifically about Lee. I want you to be able to extract the info that essentially summarizes this piece. Because tomorrow, you're going to actually rewrite a chunk of this text. You're going to make it cleaner than the way the author did it. And lastly, just kind of as a big reminder, again, you're focusing on the organizational structure here. Okay, now the piece actually begins on page 95, and if you go ahead and flip through, you're going to see that it goes through 95, 96, 97, and top of 98. And there is no way that we're going to read this piece aloud. That's going to take so much time, and a lot of you could probably get through it a lot quicker than us going one paragraph at a time. So instead, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be reading this piece with a partner, and I'm going to give you a set time limit. So you might find yourself reading through step by step, paragraph by paragraph at some point, and then when you realize the time is starting to run out, you're going to practice skimming through it just to get it done. Okay? First what I'm going to have you do, in that top right corner of page 95, I want you to write a key for yourself. Now, you don't have to write exactly how I have it, but some folks prefer to just fully write out Grant, Lee, similarity, difference. If you want to, you can have G.B. Grant, L.B. Lee. Or if you want to make yourself a symbol or a color coding system, you could do that as well. Whatever you think is going to be best for you. Each one of the paragraphs in this piece is focusing on an element. So one paragraph might focus solely on introducing Grant and Lee. Maybe one paragraph is talking about differences of Grant. Maybe another paragraph is just the similarities of both men. So what I'm going to have you do with your partner, you're going to look at each paragraph and determine what was actually happening there. Was it just a discussion of who Grant was or who Lee was? Was it a similarity or a difference? So aside from making those markings, I also want you to be able to highlight what was the key info. So what happened in those paragraphs? Now in terms of the time frame, I'm going to give you about 13 minutes. So 13 minutes, you might be able to read it word for word. You might have to start skimming it near the end. Okay? But after 13 minutes, we're going to walk through each paragraph and make sure that we identify the info that we need for tomorrow. All right, any questions before you start up? All right, I'm going to put that timer on. You've got 13 minutes to make your way through this text. Go ahead.